Stream is live, and I want to welcome all of our patrons to the first ever Patreon-only intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp. Hello, Kevin.
Jason, good to see you.
I'm really pleased that we're going to be doing this show together, and we're going to just be vamping for a moment because in preparing for this first ever episode, there's always some technical snafu that pops up, and getting logged into your Patreon page to share the stream took about 2 minutes longer than we had expected it would. So for people who are not yet subscribed to Kevin on patreon.com, I hope people will go there. And if they just go to patreon.com and search for Kevin Shipp, this is the page right here, and you can see some of Kevin's content on there in terms of his YouTube videos, and you're going to start seeing new Patreon-only content coming on there. We've scheduled it to begin at 6:33 on Kevin's page, so people who are watching this right now are watching on the Crowdsource the Truth Patreon page, and you're obviously already subscribed. We appreciate your patronage tremendously, and I want to thank everyone for joining us here on Patreon. If you choose to join both, as little as $1 a month will get you on board for these Patreon live streams. People can also purchase Kevin's book from the Company of Shadows, and that's available either from Amazon.com if you want to feed the beast and give money directly to the CIA. Of course, you could purchase it from Kevin's website, fortheloveoffreedom.net, and you're going to get a hand-signed copy of the book. Kevin will sign it, and you're also going to receive the special code. Why don't you remind everybody what that code is all about there, Kevin?
Sure. Thank you, Jason. When I first came out to expose the CIA, its cover-ups, and some of the illegal things it was doing, I wrote the book From the Company of Shadows. I was able to get operational information in there, some of the operations I was involved in. They let me publish that, but with the information that I wrote regarding the break-ins to our house, the poisoning of our family, the environmental reports that I had documented, and all the evidence I collected, they blacked all of that information out, which for the CIA, based on an executive order, is illegal for them to black out information just to cover illegal or nefarious activity. So seeing that, what I did was I built a code into the manuscript that unlocks what they blacked out, and then I sent the book through the CIA censors, and they completely missed the code. So the code is in there. Humbly, I don't think any CIA officer has done this before and lived, but it was important to me that that was a major constitutional issue, and they shouldn't be allowed to get away with illegal activities like that.
That's really awesome that you were able to do that. So clever. And I think that it's a good piece of information for people to have. I never knew that there were laws about the redacting of information, and I wonder if that's going to become more of an issue now that all of these FBI vault documents are coming out about the Clinton Foundation. We've seen redactions throughout that document that Charles Ortel keeps revisiting, where the high-level State Department individual walked in to the FBI. I think we're going to have a great opportunity, Kevin, to get into a lot of this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you'll see more blackouts and redactions of illegal. Typically, when they do something illegal, unconstitutional, or attacking something, they will black it out and call it classified. And that's one of my missions, is to expose that shadow government technique so people can see what they're doing. The FBI FISA case is a prime example. They're blocking things out that were illegal things that they did, and it has nothing to do with intelligence.
Right. And I'm glad to see you again. It's been a little while since our last meeting in our previous undisclosed location that people now know was Dallas.
Yeah, we're at the beach, man. This is a cubicle.
I've selected a hotel that looks remarkably similar to our last meeting.
I feel like I'm in the same spot.
That's right. But we haven't had a chance to really talk about some important things. The Trump-Putin summit, for instance. There's been a lot of talk about the Magnitsky Act, Putin calling out Bill Browder. I mean, that's kind of unprecedented that a president of a country as powerful as Russia just straight says, hey, by the way, this guy's up to some major league illegal activity. Now, there's been some back and forth. Putin quoted $400 million going to the Clinton Foundation, and then we've heard people say, no, that was incorrect, it was 400,000. Right. But I'm pretty sure Charles Ortel told me, no, it was 400 million. So what's the number?
Yeah, I'd go with Charles, because I have great respect for his financial investigative skills. So I would, if Charles found that, then I think that's probably pretty accurate.
I'm going to triple check that with him, because this is certainly a very, very important matter that we
It's a big difference in figures, yeah.
Well, but what do you think is going to happen? I mean, Putin calls this guy out, and he even offered the concept of a joint investigation between Robert Mueller's special counsel office and investigators in Russia. Now, were it a legitimate investigation, that would seem valuable. When you were conducting, did you get involved in investigations in the CIA?
No, I did a lot of investigations, both internal and international. Oh, yes, you bet, especially counterintelligence investigations. I did a lot of those. I did some international investigations on hacking and things like that. So it's done. It's not usually done with Russia. It's typically with the Five Eyes, other services, UK and Australia and the others. So no, not typically done with Russia.
But wouldn't that be an incredible resource for an investigation to have access to? Even if you don't trust the other party, you're right in there. You're seeing how they react. You're seeing what witnesses they provide and don't provide.
The more truth, the better. In my humble opinion, that was a dangle by Putin. It was a strategic move to get that information out to the world, where that 400,000 went to. It went into HSBC Bank.
Right.
It's an old CIA laundering money bank that was busted for laundering cartel money from South America while James Comey entered the board of directors and Mueller was doing an investigation. So Putin just dropped that little bomb out there, which leads all the way back to Mueller's complicity with HSBC and James Comey on their board of directors. None of them were criminally charged. In my opinion, by Putin doing that, he just pointed all the arrows at Comey and Mueller for Trump to use if he deems necessary. So it was kind of a brilliant move, I think, to do, but I think that's what he was doing.
Wow. So Vladimir Putin, he is a remarkably astute, incredibly strategic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everyone knows he's a former KGB officer, so even though you and he were probably in those competitive agencies at different time frames, he's certainly a formidable opponent.
Oh, there's no question about that. People always say, well, he's former KGB. If that's all they can come up with, I think they need to dig a little deeper. But no, he is a master chess player. You can count on that. He's no great friend of the U.S. At least, hopefully we can make him an ally, as he used to be, because that's great for both sides of security. But he's a chess player and a good one. So when Putin says something, you check into it, and I think he's putting something out there to lead people back to HSBC, which connects into the Clinton crime syndicate, something that I've come forth on recently and then took a lot of electronic heat after that. But I think, just in my humble opinion, that's what he's doing.
Yeah, that seems like an incredible assessment right there.
It's never been done in a summit before, where a leader drops some intelligence out there for the U.S. to follow up on regarding criminal activity of a syndicate. So, yeah.
So would you say that this is an indication that Vladimir Putin is changing with the times? I mean, so much intelligence now is based on open source, because just everything is out in the open. I mean, it's basically impossible to control the flow of information, even though they're trying as best they can. Certainly the failed Soviet Union and now Russia doesn't have nearly the financial or technological resources of the NSA and the various agencies of the United States. So this information is everywhere, and he is saying something right out in the open that, until you just explained it, I don't think most people got that.
No, they didn't. No.
Now, this football that Putin gave to Trump, people have speculated. I understand there's a chip in the FIFA ball, so that when they are broadcasting the games, they can follow the ball with some electronic marker. People have speculated that Putin handed Trump some sort of thumb drive in the soccer ball. What do you say to that?
If there's a chip in the ball, they need to destroy it. because if there's a chip in the if Putin, if that was a legitimate gift, and I'm not saying it wasn't, then he would be sure to make it clear to Trump that that chip had been removed. Having done that sort of thing before, I guarantee you they took that football and technically scanned that thing big time. And the question is, where did it wind up? So it would be a really huge mistake for Putin to leave the chip in there and to bug our president with such a cheap shot.
I think people were saying that it was information that he was passing off to Trump.
That's possible.
Why would he do it like that?
Well, because of the media. And when he dropped that little piece of intelligence that led everybody back to HSBC, why wouldn't he put something on the chip regarding the Clinton crime syndicate to pass to Trump, which again would be a remarkable thing at a summit. Entirely possible based on some of the things Putin has done in the past and his desire to become close to the United States again for his own reasons.
Right.
But yeah, he is that. I think smart enough to do that kind of operation. The press completely misses it. Nobody knows what's on there. I mean, it would be one heck of a way to pass some sensitive information to the U.S.
How would Trump know that it's there?
Well, he'd take it directly to the NSA, and if it's encrypted, they decrypt it and dump it out as long as he can trust the NSA, which has been kind of purged, but not. They're still spying on all of us, despite what they said. But that would be a brilliant operation for Putin to load some data in there about organized crime in the United States and pass it to Trump. If that's true, I hope someday it's unlikely, but I hope someday they'll reveal that, because that's the stuff that non-fictional books are made of.
Right, that's like spy novel level,
yes. Yeah.
level
It's a
stuff.
brilliant thing, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, you spoke about Putin not being a friend of the United States. I mean, it's interesting to me how the press wants to put these sort of terms on it, that why does Donald Trump trust Putin over the U.S. intelligence agencies? I was a little disappointed that President Trump didn't articulate more clearly that it wasn't necessarily a matter of trust. He doesn't trust Putin. Putin actually said this in his interview with Chris Wallace. He said,
Good interview, by the way.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
He said that you shouldn't presume that I trust Mr. Trump or that he trusts
Right.
me. We have no reason to trust
Right.
each other. We're
Yeah.
trying to build that trust.
Right.
But it's simply a matter of assessing the facts to say that there's no evidence that Russia interfered. What is it that they're even alleging, Kevin, that they interfered?
You know, Russia and the United States, we've been spying on each other for decades. We've also been spying on our allies for decades. That's part of that entire intelligence culture. I think Putin very sincerely wants good relations with the United States because it's totally in his benefit.
Right.
What people, I think, don't realize is 80% of Russia are Orthodox Christians. And that Putin himself is an Orthodox Christian. He came out with a videotape I'd encourage people to walk, decrying the moral depravity in the West, from pedophilia on to the media, and you never see that.
Putin made that
Putin did.
video.
I'd recommend people go look at that because
Wow.
it's quite remarkable. So, but he's a master strategist. There's one thing that matters to Vladimir Putin, and that's his country and his people. Now he meets Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a nationalist for his country, for his people, and I think that is something that Putin respects. No, they can never trust each other, ever. But yes, they can align with the United States and Russia, become
Right.
allies, and that's a win for everyone.
Right, and that's the distinction that I wanted to make, is that it's not the type of trust that people typically consider when we're talking about a friend or a marriage or something like that. But I think that the two men can achieve a level of trust. I mean, look, even when you're talking about a fellow American, that somebody calls you up at your business and they want to enter into a business negotiation, do you automatically trust someone who calls you who you've never met before,
Right.
who's on the opposite side of a business deal? I mean, you've got a certain level of understanding and mutual agreement that you both want to engage in business, but obviously that person wants the best deal they can get, you want the best deal
Right.
you can get, and everybody's got a different standard for what it is
Yeah.
that they're willing to do in a business negotiation to get that
Same
best
kind
deal.
of thing. And the best, most functional relationship is a symbiotic relationship. If both parties benefit, then both parties are typically going to stay somewhat loyal to each other because they're both benefiting from the relationship. And I think that's what Trump is trying to build with Putin, and it may be what Putin is trying to build with Trump. Not a relationship of trust, but one of symbiosis, where they both benefit from the relationship. I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, and that just makes sense for everybody. I mean, it's just obvious that that's what they would want to achieve, and
Yeah.
the United States press is just unrelenting. They cannot
They're out of
give
control.
up, and they're always finding
Yeah.
the negative in anything that that Trump does. He goes and has a summit with Kim, and they say, "Oh, that's terrible."
Yeah.
If he didn't have a summit, they'd say, "Well, all this tweeting is going to cause a nuclear war."
Yeah, yeah. The mainstream media, for several unfortunate reasons, are bent on one thing, and that is the destruction of Donald Trump. Whether what he does is good, bad, or ugly, if he went out and did something, if North Korea continues the way it's going, and we wind up with relations with them, that's Nobel Peace Prize material. But do you
Yeah.
think the press is ever going to give him credit for that? They are aligned to destroy Donald Trump. Why? Because he is shaking the establishment, both the shadow government, deep state, and the connected national news media. They want him gone, no matter what he does.
It definitely seems like we're seeing signs that the deep state is nervous more
Oh,
than
yeah.
we ever have before.
Yeah.
We just had James Clapper come out with a shocking statement we covered on Sunday with Charles, where he's saying Obama was basically turbocharging stellar wind.
Threw Obama under the bus. He's afraid for his own legal safety.
I mean, isn't that a clear sign of that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
This is the rats leaving the
Yes,
sinking ship.
absolutely.
So what do you expect to see happen next relative to Mr. Clapper?
Well, both he and Brennan, who's even worse. They know the laws that were broken. They know the soft coup that they are involved in. The reason that they're so adamantly against Trump vocally now is they know what they did. And for the first time, in the case of the CIA especially, for the first time, what they did is coming out.
Yeah.
And they want to stop that at all costs. You can see the vitriol that comes out of John Brennan and James Clapper, both of which, what a coincidence, are working for CNN and MSNBC, the Trump attackers. Gee, what a coincidence. So there's no question about the fact that both those guys, Clapper and especially John Brennan, are concerned that they may be facing some indictments.
Right. And it's been, since the election, they were first, thinking Trump was never going to win. We saw Jeb Bush have that violent reaction, "You will never be president."
Yeah.
So it's like their whole world has been shaken. I mean, this is
It
a
has.
system that's been going on for 30, 40,
Almost
possibly
60
200 years.
Yeah. In terms of intelligence, yeah.
Right? And so now we've got Trump coming in there. He's defying these intelligence agencies in a way we haven't seen a president do since JFK.
Since JFK. That's right. Typically, every president, and as much as I liked Ronald Reagan, it included him, the intelligence agencies have manipulated the White House every single time. Mr. President, you just give your speeches on camera, you let us handle intelligence. And most presidents, not being experts in that, just say, okay, go ahead and do that. Well, we got Iran-Contra. That's how that happened. So since JFK, and we saw what happened there, this is the first president to challenge the intelligence community, specifically the CIA and the FBI, in decades. And it's got them shaken up, running scared, and Clapper and others are fighting back publicly with the national media as much as they can, because Trump has shaken up the shadow government. Whether you're pro-Trump, neutral, or anti-Trump, he has shaken up and is shaking up the shadow government. I can tell you that because I was in there, and I know some people that are still in there, and many of which are cheering Trump on, frankly. But he's shaking the place up.
Yeah, I mean, what he's doing is incredibly important for the protection of U.S. citizens. I mean, we've heard Bill Binney tell us about how the NSA took his software that was intended to scan the content of calls for trigger words while protecting innocent people.
Yeah.
And they've just turned it into wholesale spying
Use it on everybody. Yeah.
Right. So we've got no checks and balances against these agencies. And when they wrote the Constitution, super secret agencies that could spy on everyone with technology that they couldn't conceive of wasn't part of it. So when we hear these statements like we're living in a post-constitutional America,
We are.
it's absolutely true.
We absolutely are.
Patriot Act, Stellar Wind, all this stuff. We need a
Unbelievable.
president that's going to fight back,
Absolutely.
or we're just dead.
I mean, we were. If the election had gone the other way, we were facing a serious erosion of our Constitution. We're in a post-constitutional government, and you nailed it right on. And we have been since the CIA and the NSA gained unconstitutional power, unchecked by Congress, many times not even known by Congress, and they have gone completely rogue to their own ends and their own organization. And that is the destruction of our democracy and our Constitution. So to challenge them and expose them is something that absolutely has to be done if we're going to maintain our constitutional republic, because they are out of control.
Right. And you just raised two really important incidents that I've been aware of my whole entire life. You spoke about JFK assassination and Iran-Contra. And when I look at common denominators, I think you know who I'm going to talk about. It's George Herbert Walker Bush.
Yes.
And as you rightly said, most presidents are not well versed in the ways of clandestine agencies, except George Herbert Walker Bush.
He would be the exception.
I'm surprised how many people alive today still do not realize that George Herbert Walker Bush, Poppy Bush, who got that nickname not because he's a father.
Because of the plant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that he was the director of the CIA
Right.
in 1976.
I met him. Yeah.
You met him.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about him?
He, you can trace, and this is the alarming part. You can trace George H.W. Bush's activity all the way back to before the JFK assassination, when he was a CIA operative back then. And he keeps popping up in oil deals and things that were connected to parties against JFK, and Allen Dulles, who wound up the CIA director that hated Kennedy, wound up being in charge of the Warren Commission and manipulating witnesses and things. George H.W. Bush goes all the way back to that. He's a dark player, and some people don't want to hear that. The GOP doesn't want to hear that because they contributed millions, and they think they're the head of the Republicans. People are starting, even on the GOP side, to wise up that this guy, H.W., was involved in some pretty dark stuff for the CIA, going back a couple of decades or more.
Right. And of course, when you talk about oil and you talk about some of the involvement of the CIA in the early days, like with United Fruit and some of the interference there in Cuba,
yes, exactly.
we really need to kind of zoom out on all this stuff and see what was going on. At the time that the CIA was most interested in Cuba, it was both natural resources, as I understand it, in terms of sugar cane and other agricultural things, offshore oil, but really it was money laundering through casinos. Havana was, prior to Las Vegas being what it is today, Havana was the spot. It almost seems like after the fall of Cuba, or its transition to communism under Castro, Las Vegas was created possibly to do the same thing, and now we've had this big event, October 1st, 2017, in Las Vegas. So there's all these connections with all of these different things. And when you talk about presidents not being involved in intelligence and letting that all go off to the intelligence agencies while they make speeches, Herbert Walker Bush's presidency really represents a transition in American politics to calling it organized crime is not even, it's the deep state taking over the government.
Sitting in the Oval Office,
And we went from Herbert Walker Bush to Bill Clinton. Those guys, of course, joined at the hip.
And notice
in
how
Mena,
they're such
Arkansas.
good buddies now. Arch political enemies, and now they're buddy-buddy. Why do you suppose that is? Because they both had the same clearance, they both were involved in the same operations, and they both have the goods on each other. So now they're buddy-buddy,
Right. Well, and of course, Bill Clinton, as the governor of Arkansas, enabling the operation that was at the heart of Iran-Contra, where weapons went to Iran, money from the weapon sale purchased cocaine from the Contras who were fighting the Sandinistas, and then that cocaine came back into the United States, created the crack epidemic, simultaneous with Bill Clinton passing his crime bill. When I speak to black friends, they are well aware that the 80s and 90s to the black community represents a destruction of the black family structure.
Through drugs,
drugs infiltrating the neighborhoods, minority neighborhoods. Really, it's so sinister, it's difficult for most people to contemplate.
You're right. There's a psychological barrier. It's hard for people people to cross that their government would do things like that, and so a lot of people don't even want to go there. They'd rather just put their head in the sand, because once you realize that your government has and is doing those sorts of things, that changes everything. And if you remember with Martin Luther King, who I'm a big fan of how he did his movement, they were bugging the pulpits and churches that he spoke at. This is our government. Bugging the civil rights movement, following him, and eventually, of course, he was shot. But that's what this government, the shadow government, will do to someone who it considers a threat.
That's right. And of course, Martin Luther King was the victim of the FBI's COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, where they were sending letters to him, telling him to commit suicide, contacting his wife about extramarital affairs.
In America? Yeah, happened in America. Yeah.
So it really hasn't necessarily changed so much as we're now becoming more aware of it. And when you spoke about Clapper and Brennan going to CNN, sort of the tie that I was trying to make is that really the CIA's activities in Cuba and elsewhere around the world were not, as they might have us believe, in the interest of American freedom. They were in the interest of the largest corporations in America.
That's right.
And at that time, we really, news media and the consumption of media, not everyone had a little television in their pocket, and people weren't watching video content everywhere they went in the way that they are today. Basically, if you could control CBS, NBC, ABC, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, you had it locked up.
Which they did. But
they did. And now we see the proliferation of information through Twitter, which there's been a big dust-up with Donald Trump accusing Twitter of suppressing conservative voices. You've experienced that. Shadow banning, all this. Trump is now talking about investigating that. Twitter stock plunged, interestingly. So there's this movement afoot to create something that I've dubbed Operation Mocking Tube, where they're trying to control the flow of information over the internet. But
absolutely right.
People like you and I are making that a little bit more difficult, and efforts like what we're doing right here on the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp are really fighting against that very effectively, I think.
And that's why they're pestering us, because we're hovering over the target, and now with the system that we've set up, we're independent from that sort of control, trolling algorithms, and all that other stuff. And we're a new entity, a new animal that's stepped outside of the control of Mockingbird 2, which is real and still involves the CIA. And this is one way to get around that, and that's why we're doing this, and I think it's going to be something to watch.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of stuff planned for sure. Kevin, I noticed you had a tweet earlier this week or last week that after your incredible speech, which you and I were working together on in Dallas, and if people haven't seen that, I hope they'll go back in the archives of Crowdsource the Truth. It's just one of the best presentations I've seen on the subject. But since doing that, you've come under even more aggressive attacks, electronic interference, etc. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and they've been harassing me since I came out and exposed what they're doing, put the code in the book. They can't do anything because they know that what I'm doing is legal and what they did is illegal. But when I did the speech on the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton's connection to the shadow government, the speech that you were at, we got back, and within 3 days we got hit hard. Both our internet channels were hit and hacked, and we got a notification of that. Both our cell phones were bugged. They actually, when they were switching their surveillance from phone to phone, they screwed up, and we heard the surveillance talking to each other as they switched from one apparatus to the next on my wife's phone. So we took it to a expert in a certain telecom company that's been the CIA surveillance arm for decades, and they're even worse now. We took it to an executive, of course, who I'm protecting, told him what happened, told him the numbers that were mentioned as they switched over, and he said, oh yeah, you're being surveilled. They activated surveillance on your phones. So we got that directly from a senior executive in one of these surveillance companies that the CIA uses. Then they took down, we have a lot of security on the farm, as you could imagine. Then they took down our CCTV cameras, just took the whole system down.
That's scary, because that's your security
That's
system.
our security. They shut down all of our visual security we have a little off-the-grid farm somewhere deep in the southern United States. They took that down, and then we have man-size audible detectors around there too, and the man-sized detectors went off, and the detector right outside our door went off at the same time all of this was happening. And of course, we got our stuff together and ran out exercising our Second Amendment right, but whoever it was gone by the time we got out there. So we got hit pretty hard after the Clinton shadow government speech, and I have learned when you get hit hard like that, you are over the target.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's you left the CIA 2002?
Yes.
16 years.
Yeah.
So we have no indication that these types of players are ready to give up.
No, they can't give up. It's not their procedural setup. It's not. The CIA is designed the same way it was when it came into being in 1947. It's designed to engage in dark ops. That's what it does. It can't change. It's the way the entire outfit is run, and it's the same as it was when it was formed in 47.
Wow.
And that's just what they do. That's what the CIA is.
Yeah, and certainly the things we see in the mainstream media, as far as they're always coming out with some new reason to be, going after Trump or his lawyer or Paul Manafort or whatever it might be. I think it's also interesting that it really just going back to Putin for a moment, it really seems like that statement was in defense of Donald Trump. I think Putin is a friend of Donald Trump.
I would say that was in defense of Donald Trump, yes. I would say so, and I think just based on everything that we've seen outside of the mainstream media, I think Putin wants relationships with Trump because Trump is different. He's a different kind of president, and somebody probably that Putin, being a brilliant strategist, can work with. So I think that's true, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Putin wants to open up trade. He wants to continue selling natural gas to Europe. He doesn't want, I mean, certainly if Hillary Clinton had become president, we'd be at war in Syria. That gas pipeline would be taken over by Saudi Arabia and Qatar.
Yes.
Two entities that she herself said in an email to John Podesta, leaked on WikiLeaks, that Qatar and Saudi Arabia are funding ISIS. Obviously, they want chaos in Syria so that Bashar Assad can be knocked out. We can take that place over and get Russia out of the gas
Syria
pipeline.
was an option. We also know now, I was on the Citizens Commission for Benghazi investigating Hillary's connection to that. We now know that Hillary Clinton was running guns, which is illegal. It's a violation of U.S. and international law. She was running guns into Benghazi using Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Those guns wound up on the border of Syria. They wound up with the Free Syrian Army. They wound up with ISIS.
Wow.
So that is documented. It's out there for people that want to search. So she was behind running guns secretly to support terrorist activity against Assad, and of course, eventually, as this usually is driven by big corporations, get control of their natural resources in Syria. What a lot of people don't know, too, Jason, is that Assad is the only Middle Eastern leader that protected the Christian communities in Syria. They were protected by his army. They flourished, and Vladimir Putin approved, along with Assad, the erection of a statue, a 100-foot statue of Jesus that they had erected in one of the Christian sectors that Assad was protecting and Putin was supporting. Do you know who went up and wiped out an entire village of Christians in Syria? The Free Syrian Army, supported by the United States government.
Well, and that brings me to this image of John McCain chilling with the members of the Free Syrian Army.
Boy, I mean, that was an oops
people
moment.
Don't seem to realize the importance of this. What is he doing hanging out with these guys?
Yeah, he's a shadow senator. The guy all the way on the left in that picture wound up being an ISIS leader, the guy in the black T-shirt.
I mean, do we really think that John McCain did not know that at the time that he was, whoops, we don't want to go to that right now, sorry. Do we really think that John McCain didn't know that at the time that he took that photograph?
Yeah, he's either the dumber than a post, or he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, I think he knew what he was doing. I mean, he's another one of these guys who's been in it for so long. And these are the people that are going against Donald Trump. They're utilizing CNN. They're utilizing MSNBC.
No,
they're utilizing Fox, frankly. I think Sean Hannity might be a fan of Trump, but, you know,
he seems to be. Well, you know, every news outlet has advertisers and journalists. And I can tell you, and I'm not talking about Fox, specifically, but there are journalists in these news outlets who worked for the agency at some time in the past and signed the agreements. Some of those people are still there. I'm not saying Fox News, I'm not calling out them. You'll get things on Fox you won't get on CNN ever, but you got to take everything with a kernel of truth and do your own investigation. I think Fox is probably the best at bringing out things like this, but every news network is controlled by its advertisers and investors from Saudi Arabia, which Fox News has a Saudi Arabian investor, so, and they have to play to these people. So we watch Fox. I think Sean Hannity's really had some kahunas lately, coming out against a lot of this stuff where no one else is. So I'm not downing Fox, but I'm revealing the system that kind of functions with these networks and how they operate and why they wind up attacking Donald Trump, and that's the system itself.
Yeah, he's really shaking it to its core.
He is.
Now, I know I've been kind of freewheeling here. You've prepared some notes for us. You had a bunch of things you wanted to discuss?
Well, we're going to talk about whistleblowers.
Right.
And are they legitimate? Are they not legitimate? Or do they have an axe to grind? And of course, some of them I know personally, Bill Binney and others. And whistleblowers, they call me a whistleblower. I don't really like that term personally. I prefer constitutionalist. Because I took the CIA to task over their constitutional and legal violations. But whistleblowers, there is an exact procedure that the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI uses to destroy a whistleblower. And I think in the third segment of my 3-hour lecture, I get into exactly how they do it, because I was a manager in the CIA, and they tried to get me to do this. But what they will do with these whistleblowers first is try to completely destroy them financially, throw them into a legal battle where they have to pay for expensive attorneys. In my case, they withheld my retirement funds, which is a felony, and I reminded OPM of that, and I had it within a week. But the CIA actually tried to block my retirement funds. They were surveilling me, of course. They broke into my house twice as I was sending these environmental reports about the poisonings, things I couldn't believe. When I thought they'd never do that, they did it. So blacked out documents, destroyed documents from the internal system, on and on it went. I found out later from an internal IG staffer that the CIA IG was targeting me. Because I sent my case to them for help. They were targeting me because they were terrified that my case, what I was involved in, would come out public in the news media. So to keep it from going public, they tried to destroy me in every category. Financially, my family was poisoned, very, very sick. My oldest son almost died, and that's a whole other thing. Having been them, I was 2 steps ahead. We collected all kinds of evidence. I did. Submitted that to a courageous attorney who I can't mention his name. Someday I hope I can. But he presented the evidence to a federal judge. The evidence that I had collected against the CIA was so strong, the judge ordered the CIA to a mediated settlement in Washington. We went there. I presented my case before all the attorneys. The CIA settled based on that evidence. We walked out thinking it was over. 3 days later, and this is what they do to whistleblowers, 3 days later, the CIA contacted my attorneys and said, "We're not going to abide by the settlement agreement." He's like, WTF? No one does that. He goes, "No, we're not. As a matter of fact, if Mr. Shipp doesn't take a lower settlement, we're going to invoke the state secrets privilege, seal his case, and make it illegal for he or his family to talk about it."
Wow.
So he said, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, so-and-so. I call him Clive in my book that I'm writing now. That just flagged a bunch of CIA people scrambling around. I'm writing another book. Anyway, I said, "Clint, you go back and tell them Brinkman. Brinkman is his last name, the one we're using anyway. You go back and tell them that we expect them to abide by the settlement that they signed that day.
Right.
And no, we will not be intimidated by the state secrets privilege." So what did they do? Mr. Brinkman went back and told them that, and the CIA invoked the state's secrets privilege, sealed all of my environmental studies. I had affidavits from witnesses on that base. They were ordered to follow us. The break-ins to our house, the reports were destroyed. I had affidavits from the guards on the base that those things had gone. All that was sealed by the CIA using the state secrets privilege, and they even threatened my wife and children with prison if they violated the state secrets privilege and talked about the case to anyone.
Wow.
So what do you do about that? Well, in my case, you spend over a week thinking about this, and finally I reached a conclusion. Number one, not my family, you don't. And number two, not my constitutional government, you don't. So I wrote the book. I built the code exposing the state secrets privilege in the book, contacted Congressman Frank Wolf, who tried to do an investigation. The CIA blocked him 7 times. So they tried to shut me down, and I went on anyway and exposed them. Much of that is in the book and was blacked out. The code will reveal much of that. In the epilogue, I just encourage people to go to the epilogue and check that out, because I built some of the code in there. I did that because what they did was so unconstitutional and so illegal. I joined the CIA because of my love for this country. I went on one-way missions for the agency. And then when I saw them do this, I was humbly a Category 1 officer, which is the highest category. I couldn't believe that they would do this, not just to one of their own employees, but to a family, to a wife and 3 children. So I made the decision to come out, and I have learned the only way to deal with the shadow government is to go full-bore public. If you play by their rules like Thomas Drake did, they'll destroy you. They have a system specifically set up to destroy whistleblowers. The only thing you can do, you go through that system, you're done. As you come out and you go public with your information. And that's what I did with the book From the Company of Shadows, and that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing to hear how vindictive they are.
Oh, yeah.
And how willing
Deadly.
they are to
Yeah.
break the law.
Yeah.
And it's not like they did it to protect some larger group of Americans. They're doing it to cover their own transgressions.
That's right.
So they're so far deep into this legacy of illegal activity that all they can really do is perpetuate it. And that's really what Hillary Clinton's presidency would have been.
Yes.
It would have been an invasion of Syria,
Yes.
more saber-rattling towards North Korea, more saber-rattling towards Russia, more proliferation of illegal financing. I mean, it's
No
hard
doubt.
to really imagine. So the thing I wanted to say about Herbert Walker Bush, to bring it back to him, although we've had dynastic presidential families in the past, I think Adams and there were some other presidents whose sons became president. In modern history, really the Bushes are the most memorable. We had Herbert Walker and then, of course, George W. And it seems to me that when we transition to the Clintons, they have ushered in a new era of dynastic corruption where going from husband to wife is even closer than father to son because they're closer in age, it's a closer relationship. They really are one unit, and frankly, they're considered one unit under the law. As far as I know, and we can ask Larry Klayman about this, there's no law that prevents a father from testifying against a son in court, but you cannot be forced to testify against a spouse.
That's right.
So by Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton being this dynastic presidential family, this couple, it's a dangerous prototype for something that the Obamas seem to be gearing up right now.
Yeah, and it's intentional. And
It's
planned.
intentional.
Yes.
You know, and I think Michelle Obama is a dangerous candidate because
I agree.
whatever you and I think about Donald Trump, and I think he's doing a remarkable job as president, I'm happy I voted for him and I'm happy that he's president. But there are a lot of people who hate him. There are a lot of people who watch the news and for whatever reason they have, dislike Donald Trump. And it seems to me the most logical candidate in 2020 for the Democrats is the total opposite of Donald Trump. And I cannot think of anything more opposite than an old white man than a younger black woman.
Yes.
And I don't think Maxine Waters is going to be on the ticket.
What did somebody said? I forget who it was. I don't want to say their name. And told Maxine to take off the James Brown wig. You know, but he was a journalist. I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, if they put her up, it's a shoo-in for Trump.
Well, she would never be there. But my point is,
yeah.
you know, we've got this Barack Obama Foundation tooling up, and if Michelle does run in 2020, 2024, 2028, 2032. She's a woman in her 50s. She could be running for the next 20 years.
Yeah, well, yes, and the thing that people I think should be upset about, I'm a big fan of James Brown, by the way. I used to listen to his stuff. He had it going on. But anyway, people should be upset because all of us, I wanted the first Afro-American president, big time. And so many of us did, and they did a number on all of us by putting this subversive man in there, using that to get him elected. And the same will go with Michelle Obama. I hope that minority employees understand what these two people are about. I have a lecture called The Subversion of America on Donald Trump. Go in there and research what this guy's past, which links him to Michelle through the marital bond. And you know, if they try to pull that and use the Afro-American community and all the communities that want that sort of thing, they're being played. And people just need to understand, don't be played. Let's find an Afro-American candidate who's not subversive, doesn't have communist backgrounds and roots, college transcripts haven't been sealed, and millions of dollars coming from nowhere. Let's get somebody who's a legitimate patriotic American, because they're pulling a fast one on the American people.
Right. And so there's been a lot of controversy about Barack Obama's birth certificate. It first came about actually from Hillary Clinton's campaign. I believe Sidney Blumenthal brought it forward, and Donald Trump was famously a, as they call it, birther.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you know, I think most people who watch Crowdsource the Truth know that I'm a digital imaging expert. I've been in the field for over 30 years, and I can spot lots of signs of forgery in digital documents. And of course, Dr. Corsi and Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Mike Zullo did a lot of work investigating that document. And I don't have any evidence of where Barack Obama was or was not born, but I can say with 100% certainty the PDF document presented on whitehouse.gov represented as Barack Obama's birth certificate is unquestionably a digital forgery.
It's doctored.
It's doctored. Yeah. So the question becomes, I mean, it occurs to me, if the CIA is at its most active, and I mean, you know, the late 50s, early 60s seemed to be a time when the CIA was really sort of spreading its wings and doing a lot of these worldwide operations. Did the CIA go and get, hey, you're our smartest male operative, you're our smartest female operative, or the strongest, or the whatever, you guys have a kid and we're going to raise a CIA kid to insert and really take over the government? Is that something that happened?
They have done that. They would do that. You go all the way back to the inception of the CIA, and this was tough for me because I loved the CIA. I loved a lot of what I did with the CIA until I realized what they are. They will, whatever it takes to expand the CIA, protect the CIA, they will do. Also connected to big business and those sorts of things. If you look at Barack Obama's past, and Jason, we're coming from an analytical point of view, making no judgments. You look at the birth certificate, it's been doctored. Okay, what does that mean? Well, okay, let's do some further investigation and reach a conclusion. And what you're putting up on the screen now, his direct affiliation with a member of the Communist Party, was his mentor growing up. And on it goes with him.
There's argument that Frank Marshall Davis is Barack Obama's true father.
Yes, and there is some pretty good indication of that. So the man led a fabricated political life all the way up into the presidency, and of course we saw what he was doing. He expanded the NSA surveillance program, used it even more against American citizens, and things that an enemy would have done instead of a loyal president to the United States. The man was subversive. He still is subversive. Is he a CIA plant? Like James Comey, he's got all the marks of someone who'd be groomed by the CIA. And I'll just leave it with that. James Comey, his background is like a CIA operative, but Obama clearly has those marks, and people need to look into that, and I think the facts will line up pretty much in the same line of that. Yep, there it is. There you go.
This is a bit of a low-res representation, but there's color differences in the date down here. There's problems with the signature. There are elements of this birth certificate that to the pixel, perfectly line up with a birth certificate from a woman named Joanna Hani, or Johanna Ani, something like that. And the craziest part is the document separates into layers when you open it in a PDF editing program. Now, there are a lot of people who try to explain this away by saying that it's OCR, and if you scan it with this particular scanner and this software. There are even a number of YouTube videos that attempt to debunk the theory that this is a forged document, but they don't follow scientific procedure. I have personally debunked those debunking videos because those videos use a white page with black type. But quite clearly, a government document like a birth certificate is made with this color hatched pattern. That's an anti-forgery background, and if you scan that and attempt to OCR the document, even though this document was created before OCR technology, this type of color interference in the background defeats the automatic optical character recognition technology and makes that automatic separation impossible. There's a litany of problems with this birth certificate that we could explore in the future. And
yeah, that's great. All great points. And as propaganda goes, one of the oldest tricks Soviet Union, and we have used it, is called labeling. So if somebody comes up with some facts that start to expose what you're doing, you label them. You're a birther. He's a birther, conspiracy theorist, which was invented by the CIA, by the way, that term after the assassination of JFK. You're a birther. Put you in a category, you're a truther.
Right.
And that is how they label people to try to destroy their credibility and put them in a certain group. So if people hear that sort of thing again, understand that's a propaganda technique, and that's what they're using. And this is they call Donald Trump a birther. You know, so.
Yeah, and they say he's racist. I mean, perhaps you're racist against PDF documents, but that's a fake one.
Right.
I don't think it has anything to do with Obama being... I voted for the guy, so why does that be racist to say he's got a fake PDF document? Well, so there's so many other topics for us to cover. They're all racing through my head right now, but, you know, we've got really seem to be... Okay, this is what I wanted to ask you about. Peter Strzok. We're talking about CIA plants. There's been a lot of speculation back and forth. We heard that this title section chief, it was Mike Dick from the FBI, who said that IntelliHub, which is a website run by our friend Shepard Umbellis, they had a document that showed that Peter Strzok was a section chief. And IntelliHub speculated that that was not an FBI appointment, but rather a CIA appointment. And then the question came up, is Peter Strzok a CIA agent inserted into the FBI to control investigations rather than conduct them?
Based on what I have researched about Peter Strzok, his assignments, knowing what those assignments mean, allegedly inside and outside of the FBI, he was a counterintelligence expert. There's no question in my mind that he was connected directly to and working for the CIA at least one point in his career, and that one point means probably a couple of decades. I think, yes, I think he is connected to the CIA, and I think that's part of everything that we're seeing when he tried to derail a presidential election. I've said this on my Twitter account. He's the face of the shadow government and the deep state. If you want to look at a face, that's it.
It's a smug face.
And he's so arrogant. You see, these people in the shadow government, and I know because I work for them, when they get up these high levels, they're narcissists. They really think that they're the top of the evolutionary intellectual chain. I mean, they believe that. And so they get arrogant, obnoxious, and that was all over him during his testimony before his bosses, which is Congress, the representatives of the people. So, no, I think he's an operative going way back. In my humble opinion, I think James Comey is also connected because he was with HSBC as they were laundering money, similar to the BCCI. The CIA was laundering money through them. You look at these folks' background, and things kind of reveal themselves that are nefarious. And I would encourage people to go out and check out Peter Strzok's background and his titles with the FBI, and he was the FBI's counterintelligence liaison with the CIA. and then he was brought back and put in charge of FBI counterintelligence. Hello. So I'd encourage people to go check that out and line up his past, and then reach their own conclusion, because the information's out there.
Robin Gritz was also some sort of liaison between the FBI and the CIA, and it's my understanding that those positions were created after 9/11 to coordinate intelligence sharing. Is that...
That's true. When I was doing counterintelligence cases, we were searching for a mole inside the CIA. We later found out who that was. But what Congress did is they put the FBI then in charge of CIA counterintelligence. So I was co-located with FBI agents and with FBI supervisors doing counterintelligence investigations inside the United States. So we were joined at the hip. And I can tell you that the FBI agents I worked with were just outstanding people. And we'd go offline and we'd tell war stories, and we just had a great relationship. When you got to the supervisory levels of the FBI, I'll give you an example. And I can't obviously go into detail, we had a major counterintelligence case that we developed the evidence on, and we were required by the new law to turn a counterintelligence case over to the FBI underneath the new regulations. So we did. The FBI completely screwed the case up. Wow. It went really, really bad and wound up in the newspaper. So the FBI leaked the case to the press, blaming the CIA for leaked a counterintelligence case, top secret and above, to the press to try to cover themselves, cover FBI management, and blame the CIA for what they did. Saw it, witnessed it personally.
That is just crazy. The amount of leakage going on at the FBI. We did a story last week about the strange death of Peter Smith, and perhaps we can talk about that on a future show, get you involved and share some of the evidence with you. But there was a sort of transmedia marketing campaign going on in close proximity to the death of Peter Smith that involved James Comey leaking information to Ben Wittes. And Ben Wittes is a journalist who was putting out these rather sophisticated video-based tweets using slow-motion footage of a cannon, tick-tick boom, you know, creating these sort of mimetic triggers that really kicked off the whole Russia hacking, it's so unclear to me, this allegation that they're even making, because it's like, well, did Russia buy Facebook ads, and why is that illegal? Did they use bots on Facebook? I mean, how did they manipulate the election? It doesn't even seem clear.
Well, yeah, and what runs the red flag to the top of the mast, in my opinion, is the DNC claims the Russians hacked into their systems. So the FBI says, okay, great, FBI counterintelligence, we'll come in and we'll do an investigation. And the DNC said, no, we don't want you touching our computers.
Right.
That's called a cue or a clue. What are you hiding, or did it perhaps never even happened? I think it never even happened.
That's a good point. I mean, how are they allowed to say no to the FBI?
Yeah. I mean, that pretty much sums it up from the beginning right there, you know.
Right. And it's also important to note that Bill Binney had told me in our interview that one of the biggest problems that he saw was the advent of these private contracting positions that people in the intelligence agencies go to, as is the case with Sean Henry, who went and started CrowdStrike, the company that James Comey refers to as a trusted third party, to investigate this server. I mean, these guys are, Scott Bennett calls it a shell game, and that's what they're doing.
No, I think
it's
he's
like,
right.
Where's the ball? You know,
yeah.
you just keep hiding.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's an old intelligence operation, the shell game operation. It's hard to pick the target when it's moving around, you know.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, we're coming close to the end of our hour here, and I do want people to know that you and I will be on in just another 30 minutes with Larry Klayman. We're going to be talking about Extortion 17, I guess it's the 7-year anniversary or 6-year anniversary. August 6, 2011. So we're just a few days away from the 7-year anniversary of the deadliest incident for SEAL Team 6 in its history, the shoot down of a Chinook helicopter that killed all the occupants of the aircraft. Larry, of course, is representing members of, surviving members of the families who are involved in a wrongful death suit against Hillary Clinton. So I think people can tune into that on Crowdsource the Truth.
That'll
on
be
our
interesting.
free channels. It'll be very interesting to see Larry's perspective and get your input. So I want to thank everyone who's joined us here on Patreon.com on our first ever Patreon-only live stream of the Intelligence Briefing with Kevin Shipp. Kevin, I can't thank you enough for joining me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Great job.
I look forward to the next one.
Same here.
Thanks, everybody.